Oh, here we go. Yes. Yes, there it is. The internet knows. The internet knows. You always got to wait a second for the stream to wake up. That's what you always got to do. But the stream is awake. The stream is healthy. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, the guest portion of today's streaming activities. And I'm very excited about this guest. I have seen a lot on the Twitter, and they're doing a lot of things. Please welcome to the show, Rebecca Parson. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
And you are a congressional candidate running for Washington's 6th district, which is in Tacoma, Washington, an area I used to go to somewhat regularly. When I used to live in Seattle, I would perform in Tacoma a good bit. Lucy says hello, by the way. She the co-host wants to say hi too, but and I know that Tacoma also, and we don't have to get into this if it's not really like an area you dive into a lot, but I know they have a big municipal broadband movement in Tacoma, Washington. In fact, it was one of the first ones, which is very, very cool. All right, so let's get in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're the first in the country to have municipal broadband, and now the city's trying to privatize it and sell it off. But it's just, it's like we're one of the first to have this really exciting progressive thing, and trying to privatize it. But yeah, we're really proud of it, and the progressives are going to see it.
So does most of the city use that then? Like, does most of the city use the municipal broadband service?
No, because there's still a couple other ones. I mean, there's Comcast, and I can't remember the other one available, but a lot of people do use it, yeah.
That's all right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know it was like one of the first ones. It kind of set the model for everybody else. But yeah, I heard that too because I had a couple people. It's called Permalink, right? Is that right?
Well, the network is called the Click Network. Maybe Permalink is like the type of.
Okay, because I try to cover this stuff as much as I can. So like all the specific neighborhood names, I will, like I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but I know that I know that Tacoma was like one of the pioneers in this movement. And now they're facing some scrutiny, but they kind of were the model that Sandy, Oregon, then kind of looked to, and Portland, Oregon is looking to as well, because I know Portland's trying to get something pretty extensive. But anyway, let's talk about you. So you are described as a housing activist. Could you unpack that for me?
Yeah, so myself, I'm a renter, and Tacoma has the newspaper came out with a report showing that it has the fastest rising rents in the country. And I felt that personally. My rents have risen a lot in the last few years. And then in Tacoma, we have a lot of developers coming from out of the city, especially from Seattle and then out of state. They come in, they buy a property, they renovate, and they double, triple the rents. And a group that I'm involved with, the Tacoma Tenants Organizing Committee, actually formed out of one of these mass evictions, where a Seattle developer came in, bought the building, gave everybody 2 or 3 week eviction notice, and most of these people had been living there for years, and this was their one stop between if they weren't there, they were going to be homeless. And many of them were in recovery. Many had felonies. They couldn't find anywhere else because of discrimination, on disability, limited income, and that was all they could afford. And so after that happened, this tenant organized group started, and we lobbied the city successfully to enact some really strong tenant protections. And those protections then inspired the ones that went on to pass in the state legislature. So that was really awesome, but we still have, Washington State is one of the states that has a statewide ban on rent control. And so that's the next thing we're trying to work on, because it would be huge help. The number one thing you can do to stop people from becoming homeless is stop evictions from rent increases. So that's something we're working on now. And it's really important, locally and nationally. Something I don't hear politicians talk a lot about is that housing really is a matter of life and death. And that Tiki apartment building that we first formed the group out of, they've actually 3 people have died since being evicted there. And so it really is a matter of life and death. We have people dying on the streets. I was in Aberdeen in my district, which some people may know because it's where Kurt Cobain was from.
Yeah.
And, the town of Aberdeen has 16,000 people, 1,000 of them are homeless. And I went to a remembrance ceremony for people who had died on the streets at a church there. And there was probably like 30, there were names, pictures, candles, and there was like 30 people who've died homeless on the streets. So it's something I'm really passionate about, and I think that it's hard to solve locally because cities and counties and states have limited budgets, and so they're constantly trying to shuffle around where it goes. And then you often get the argument, well, if we do this, in rent control, or if we stop giving tax breaks to developers, then they'll stop coming in and they won't come to Tacoma anymore, they'll go somewhere else, that kind of thing. And so I think the federal government really needs to step in and provide the funding. And that's where, national rent control comes in, and then also the homes guarantee, which I've signed on to, which calls for the construction of 12 million new social housing units in the next 10 years, the implementation of rent control, and a lot of other policies with the ultimate goal of ending homelessness. Because as Bernie Sanders quotes a lot, there's 500,000 homeless people in this country, and of those 500,000, 200,000 are without shelter, so they're sleeping on the streets. And richest country in the world in the history of the world, and we have 500,000 people homeless, 200,000 people on the street.
I'm with you, and here in Southern California, and it's all over the country, but I feel like places like Washington State and Northern California and Southern California, it's very, very amplified. And it's amazing that you're called a radical if you say housing is a human right, which is what I entertain. I mean, my personal view is that we should just completely eliminate private property until everybody has a home. No exception. Like just everyone has a home, and if anyone doesn't, no private property. In a perfect, that's what I would like to see. But is it really that radical? Like you said, the richest country in the world, and housing isn't just considered a human right. So backing up a little bit, though, you said that you guys did get some protections through. What were some of the protections you got through?
We got the notice that tenants need to be given when evicted extended. And we also put in place a relocation fund for people who are evicted and are low income. They can apply for relocation assistance. I think it's $2,000 to move, which is really big as well. Like, it's these little nitty-gritty details that don't show up in the debate. Most people in Congress own their homes, so most politicians own their homes, whether local or national. So don't think about the fact, it's not just that you get evicted and you have to find somewhere new. Some people become homeless because they literally don't have $50 for, the application fee to do a credit screening or something. And you have to pay for that. They don't have the $50, they become homeless. And it really is those small things. So that relocation assistance fund was a huge win for us. And now we're working on just cause, so that you can't just be evicted because the landlord just doesn't like you personally, or retaliation for organizing for tenant protection, stuff like that, so that there really is a just reason, a just cause, and then rent control.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think a movement like this can build nationally? Because like what you hit on, because I mean, rent control failed here in California too, which was very, very disappointing. But the problem is kind of what you said. A lot of the people in power, they own stuff. And that's how they rule, and that's how they vote. And of course, the donor class, they own stuff as well. So how can we kind of overcome all this to have a more renter-friendly society?
I think we need to get more renters into Congress, and also stuff like Citizens United. I would love that if lobbyists, if that were just a thing anymore, ban lobbyists, ban the corporate funding of our elections, because the real estate lobby is a huge, huge funder of elections, both federally and locally. My opponent takes real estate money. And so when we have Congress made up predominantly of home-owning millionaires who take real estate money, we're not going to be able to build a tenant-friendly society. And so I think we need to get more tenants into Congress and more people who don't take corporate money, especially not real estate money.
So if elected to Congress, what are kind of like your top issues? What are your three most pressing issues that you would really be wanting to pursue on day one?
Yeah, the first one is the Green New Deal. That one, because of just the existential threat we face, and it's not being treated like an existential threat by Congress. You know, we have Nancy Pelosi calling it the Green New Dream, that kind of thing. And so we really need to be pushing for the Green New Deal. I think that if you are somebody like my opponent, Derek Kilmer, who says, you know, the science is clear and climate change is happening, but then you don't support the scientifically validated option, which the scientists are behind and say is the only thing that meets the scale of a challenge, then that is almost tantamount to climate denialism. Because you're just saying, yeah, it's changing, but I'm not going to do the scientifically mandated thing to solve it. And so I think it's really important that we have the Green New Deal. And then in my district, it would have a big impact. You know, we have, in my district, there are several tribes that are on the coast. They've lived there for centuries on the coast. It's their lifestyle, and they're having to move. One village in particular, it's costing over $1 million to move where they are by the coast, farther upland, and they're leaving behind this village where they've been forever. And it's a really big cultural loss that they have to do that. And then we also have in Tacoma, we had one summer ashes literally falling from the sky from wildfires in eastern Washington, California, and British Columbia. And so when you feel like you're in a post-apocalyptic movie and you actually have ashes falling from the sky from fires hundreds of miles away, I mean, that it's really time to act. And then the federal jobs guarantee, that's part of the Green New Deal, would be really critical for my district as well. We have, in my district is the Olympic Peninsula, which is a beautiful, like just absolutely gorgeous area. It's where from about like World War II on, in the post-war construction boom, most of the boards that constructed homes across America came from the Olympic Peninsula. Then the timber industry collapsed and it just left behind this gaping hole where jobs used to be, and there aren't enough jobs. The ones that are there aren't enough union ones that pay a living wage and have benefits. So the federal jobs guarantee would be massive. So Green New Deal is number one. Number two is Medicare for all. It's something that's really important to me is that we come up with real solutions to the addiction epidemic in our society, which is in my district it's a big problem in my district as well. And I think that having Medicare for all that includes detox, drug treatment, rehab, anything that somebody needs to get clean and sober and stay clean and sober really needs to happen, because we have politicians kind of talking and wringing their hands about it, but they don't support Medicare for all, which would be the best thing for addicts and alcoholics to get clean and sober. And then we have them continue to take money from like the pharmaceutical PHRMA, Pharmaceutical Research Manufacturing Association. My opponent, Derek Kilmer, takes money from them. That lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby in that particular PAC, is literally made up of CEOs of the companies that manufactured the opioid epidemic. And there's one county in my district where the local newspaper found that over a 6-year period, there were prescribed 76 addictive prescription pain pills per capita per year. And now they have the highest age-adjusted opioid death rate in the state. That's not a coincidence. And so it's really unacceptable to me for politicians not to support Medicare for all and to continue to take big pharma money when they're the people who created this crisis. And then the third thing is the homes guarantee, including rent control and massive construction of social housing. And what's really exciting to me is how a lot of this stuff starts to interplay. You know, so part of the Green New Deal is the federal jobs guarantee, and then if we're going to construct 12 million new units of social housing, that's a massive construction project. It's going to create a lot of construction jobs, and with the federal jobs guarantee, they should be living wage, good union jobs, and it all just starts to interplay together into creating a more just, fair, and healthy society. And so those are my top three.
So tell me a little bit about your opponent.
My opponent is Derek Kilmer. He's a Democrat. Conservative, kind of lukewarm Democrat. He's the chair of the New Democrats Coalition, which is the centrist third way caucus in Congress. His position as chair is actually the same position that AOC's opponent, Joe Crowley, held before him. And it's a very corporate-funded, Republican-light caucus. He also belongs to the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is even more conservative. And they're funded by dark money and donations from Republican billionaires, and they actively work to thwart progressive policies. Just so many things like pay go, so many things that progressives want. Problem solvers are out there working to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah. It sounds like he should just go by Boring McBoringson. Like that's like just everything you listed that not only is it toxic, but it's also like the most boring shit I've ever heard. Like he's a problem solver, and he's with the third way and the New Democrats, which means we'll do what the Republicans tell us to.
Exactly. Yeah. I think what we want. You know, it's a very safe Democratic district. We haven't had a Republican representative since the 50s. It's very blue, working class. Caucus for Bernie, it's very strong, like working class and populist as well. Even in the more Republican parts of the district, like on the Olympic Peninsula. I have friends who grew up there, their whole family's Republican, and they say, you know what, in the small town where I grew up, like this one friend in particular, which he essentially grew up in like a village in the National Forest, and it's very Republican, and he said, there's only one shrine to a politician in the entire town. It's in the Elks Lodge, and it's to FDR. So, and the Republicans there like FDR. So like they like the New Deal, and so they'll like a New Deal, the Green New Deal, or like the Just Society stuff that AOC put forward. Like it's absolutely unacceptable that we have somebody who won't support these things. Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, these progressive populist policies. Like, you know, Washington State is a very unionized state. And there are unions in my district, but not enough. But we do at least have that strong union working class tradition. And it's time to revive it and have politicians who actually work for it.
I mean, well, it's one of those things, too. The big reason Trump won, one of the reasons Trump won, was because he sold this idea that he was a right-wing populist, which isn't a real thing. That doesn't exist. But he sold that idea to enough people. So it's like, okay, well, a fake populist tricked people in 2016. A real populist can win in 2020, and real populism can win across the country, especially in places like the Midwest and in working class places in other states as well, like Washington State and Tacoma, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. So how has the response been to you so far? Have you been knocking on doors, doing that whole thing?
Yeah, we're getting the door knocking up and running. We've had a couple, and it's going really well. People are really receptive, and a lot of people don't realize the stuff that Derek Kilmer's been up to. You know, that he takes, you know, millions in corporate money, that he won't support these policies, you know, that he voted to fast track the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and none of the unions in the district wanted that. And Washington State is a very trade-dependent state. The Port of Tacoma receives goods from China all over the world. And so, yes, we are trade dependent, but even the unions like the longshoremen didn't want the TPP. And these are trade dependent unions. And so a lot of people just don't realize, they think he's a Democrat. He's probably for what I'm for, you know. And me and my volunteers, and there's been an amazing volunteer response across the district, when we start talking to people and just point out, like, this is where he takes money from, this is the stuff he's done. You know, especially like in our district, people are really upset about Trump's family separation policy. And we have in Tacoma one of the country's largest private immigration prisons. And Derek Kilmer takes money from a company that is housing children separated from their families under Trump's family separation policy. And so it really just takes pointing these things out to people and giving an alternative. And saying, like, you know, myself, I'm an organizer, an activist, and showing my background and the policies I'm for, and not for Democrats, showing them, hey, look, you know, like the state party platform has single-payer healthcare on it, and I'm for that, and Derek Kilmer's not. And so, you know, it's time that in Washington State, we have we have progressive Democrats, we have progressive platforms and policies, but it's time to actually hold our representatives to those things and say, we're progressive, and now we want you to be as well.
So where can people go to learn more about you?
My site is RebeccaForWA.com, RebeccaForWA.com. And if you want to sign up to volunteer, if you're in my district or nearby, you can volunteer in person. If you're not, we have volunteer remote opportunities. You can text bank, phone bank, stuff like that. And if you have any money that you can donate, that would be huge help, because I don't take any corporate PAC or lobbyist money. So if you can donate, really appreciate it. And I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all of them at Rebecca for WA.
All right. So RebeccaForWA.com and Rebecca for WA on Twitter and social media. Rebecca, thank you so much for doing this. And again, that's Washington 6. Please let me know anything I can do to help. And I wish you all the best on the campaign trail.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ron.
All right, cheers.